Before we begin, thanks for listening. If you enjoy the story, consider liking or subscribing. It genuinely helps more than you'd think. Now, let's see how all this started. We left St Anne's Hospital at 10:43 p.m. I remember the time because the clock above the loading bay doors was still working when we drove out. Red digital numbers, bright against the dark sky, absurdly calm while the world around them came apart. 10:43 p.m. 14 people in one ambulance. Half a tank of fuel, 1 fire axe, 3 radios, 2 children, and a voicemail from my daughter Maya that I had already listened to 6 times before we reached the end of the road. Dad, Mum says you're at work. There are police cars outside and someone keeps banging downstairs. Mum said not to call again, but I'm scared. Can you come home now? That was it. 11 seconds. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Usually, you only recognise them later. A phone call from a hospital, a police officer at the door, a doctor sitting too close with their hands folded carefully in their lap. Bad news has a shape. It announces itself before the words arrive. Maya's message did not announce itself. It downloaded quietly while I stood in the rain outside the hospital, surrounded by survivors who were waiting for me to tell them where to go next. It arrived like any ordinary missed voicemail from any ordinary night. A child wanting her father. A daughter asking to be collected. Except St Anne's was burning behind us. Except the dead had started getting up. Except I had just driven away from more people than I had saved. The ambulance bounced hard over the curb as I sped out of the loading bay. Harriet grabbed the dashboard with one hand and swore under her breath. In the cab mirror, I saw Marcus brace himself against the inside wall, fire axe in one hand, the other arm thrown out to stop Tom sliding across the floor. Someone cried out in the back. One of the children, I think, or maybe one of the adults. It was hard to tell by then. Fear made everyone sound younger. "Slow down!" Harriet snapped. I did not slow down. The hospital service road curved past the waste compound and into the staff car park. Normally that road was nothing, a place for delivery vans, smokers, porters pushing bins, nurses cutting across to the cheaper parking spaces after night shifts. Tonight, it looked like the back entrance to hell. A hospital van had crashed into the fence near pathology. Its driver door hung open, interior lights still glowing. A trail of blood led away from it in a long, dark smear that vanished under a parked car. 2 figures moved behind the vehicles ahead, slow at first, then faster when the ambulance engine echoed off the surrounding buildings. They turned toward us. They weren't people. Not anymore. One was still wearing a hospital gown, bare legs pale in the rain. The other had a high-vis jacket hanging from one shoulder and half his face missing below the cheekbone. The flesh had peeled away from his skull, and they moved, wrong, low and jerking. That was the thing that made me press my foot harder on the accelerator. Not the blood, not the injuries. I had seen broken bodies before. Emergency medicine teaches you quickly that the human body is both tougher and more fragile than anyone wants to believe. It was the movement that made me speed up. No hesitation, no pain, no self-preservation, just rabid hunger with legs. The one in the hospital gown stepped into the road. I probably had time to swerve, but anger gripped me and I pointed the wheel straight at him. The ambulance hit him at least 30 miles an hour. The sound was not like it is in films. Not a clean thump, it was wet and heavy, followed by a scraping judder beneath us as the wheels dragged something across the tarmac. The ambulance lurched upward, and Harriet's shoulder slammed into mine. Someone in the back screamed properly this time. I kept both hands firmly on the wheel. The second infected hit the side of the ambulance as we passed, palm slapping against the window beside Harriet's head. She recoiled instinctively. The thing's mouth opened against the glass, teeth snapping at its own reflection. Then it disappeared behind us. In the wing mirror, I saw it running after the ambulance. Running. That was new. "Daniel," Harriet urged. I heard the warning in her voice. Not fear exactly. Harriet had used fear up in the emergency department and turned what was left of it into anger. This was different. This was the sound of someone realising that the rules had changed again. "I saw it," I said. "No," she replied. "You didn't. Look." She pointed ahead. At the end of the service road, beyond the staff car park, the main hospital entrance came into view. Blue lights flashed across wet brick and glass. Police cars blocked half the roundabout. An ambulance lay on its side near the pedestrian crossing, wheels still spinning slowly. People were running between abandoned vehicles, but not all in the same direction. Some were trying to get away. Some were chasing. The front of St. Anne's had become a feeding ground. I slowed then, not because Harriet had told me to, but because there was nowhere else to go. A crowd surged across the main entrance. Nurses in scrubs, patients in dressing gowns, a man in a suit with blood down his shirt. 2 police officers backed away from something hidden behind a crashed car. One of them raised a baton, the other had his taser out. Neither weapon mattered much now. An infected woman burst out from behind a car and threw herself at the closest officer. He fired the taser. Both prongs hit, and I saw the wires snap tight. I saw her body jerk. But she didn't fall. She didn't even slow. She hit him chest first and took him down under the blue flashing light of his own patrol car. Harriet made a small sound beside me. I don't think she realised she'd made it. The roundabout was blocked. The main road was impossible. The staff exit already had 3 cars wedged across it and more infected moving between them. Behind us, more shapes were spilling from the loading bay side of the hospital, drawn in by the engine, by the crash, by us. "Reverse!" Harriet shouted. "No! Daniel, reverse!" she screamed, hammering the seat with her hand. "No!" I turned the wheel left and aimed for the narrow access lane beside the pathology building. Harriet looked at me like I had lost my mind. She might have been right. The lane wasn't made for ambulances. It was barely made for delivery vans. A low metal barrier hung across the entrance, marked staff access only. Behind it, a service path ran along the side of the hospital toward the old outpatient block and, if memory served, a side gate near the residential streets. If memory served. That phrase was doing a lot of heavy lifting. "It's too narrow," Harriet whimpered. "It opens out after pathology," I said. "You know that?" "No." The first infected reached the rear doors. Marcus shouted from the back, and something metallic slammed hard against the inside of the ambulance. The whole vehicle shook. I slammed on the accelerator. The ambulance struck the barrier dead centre. For half a second, I thought it would hold. The front grille crumpled inward, the barrier bent, and then the mounting bolts mercifully ripped out of the wet concrete with a shriek that cut through every other sound. The ambulance jumped forward, dragging the broken barrier beneath us in a shower of sparks. We entered the access lane too fast. Brick wall on the left, parked cars on the right, no room for mistakes. The wing mirror hit something and exploded inward. Harriet ducked as glass sprayed through the open window and across her lap. I just kept driving. Metal screamed along metal as the ambulance scraped down the side of a parked hatchback, shoving it sideways until its tyres bumped against the curb. In the back, Tom shouted that someone was bleeding. "Badly?" I asked. A pause, then a quiet no. "Then just hold pressure." The words came automatically. Doctor words, useful words. Words from a world where bleeding was still the worst thing that could happen to someone. We cleared the tightest part of the lane and burst out beside the old outpatient block. The road opened just enough for me to straighten the wheel. The crumpled barrier finally tore loose beneath us and bounced away into the dark. For 3 seconds, there was nothing in front of us. No infected, no roadblock, no bodies. Just rain on tarmac and the yellow glow of streetlights leading toward a side gate that should have been locked. It wasn't. I drove through it and out of St. Anne's Hospital, but no one cheered. No one thanked me. Behind us, the hospital receded into the rain, lit in patches by fire, emergency lights, and the useless blue flicker of abandoned response vehicles. The place where I had worked for 9 years. The place where I had intubated strangers, held hands with dying patients, argued with managers, drank terrible coffee, missed birthdays, saved lives, and lost them. The place where less than 3 hours earlier, I had still believed that the worst night of my career would end with paperwork. Now, shadows moved behind emergency department windows. Too many shadows. Harriet turned in her seat and looked back through the rain-streaked rear windows until the hospital disappeared behind a row of houses. "Tell me you've got a plan," she said. It was not a question, and I gripped the wheel harder. "No," I said. "I've got a destination." She looked at me then. For the first time since we climbed into the ambulance, I saw the calculations settle behind her eyes. Harriet had spent her whole career reading people faster than monitors. She knew when a patient was lying about how much they had drunk. She knew when a relative was about to become aggressive. She knew when a junior nurse was pretending not to cry in the sluice room. And now, she knew I had not driven away from St. Anne's because I had some big plan or a safe place for the survivors. I had driven away because of Maya. "Daniel," she said quietly. I hated the way she said my name. Not angry, not yet. Worse than that. Careful. Like I was some viper that might strike at any moment. "My daughter called me," I said. The words came out flat, too controlled. I sounded like I was giving a handover. Harriet said nothing. "She's at her mother's house," I continued. "Police outside, someone banging downstairs." That was the message. "When?" Harriet asked. "I don't know. It only downloaded at the loading bay." "When did she send it?" I didn't answer immediately. "Daniel!" I looked at the phone lying face up in the cup holder. The cracked screen glowed each time we passed beneath a street lamp. 9:07, I said. "What does it matter?" Harriet closed her eyes for a second and let out a deep sigh. 9:07. More than an hour and a half ago. In the world that existed yesterday, 96 minutes was nothing. A film you hadn't finished, a delayed train, a dinner running late. Tonight, 96 minutes was the difference between a frightened voice on a phone and an empty house. Or worse. I pressed harder on the accelerator. "You need to tell them, Daniel." "No, I can't." "Yes, they don't need to know," I insisted. Harriet scoffed. "They are sitting in the back of a speeding ambulance that you are driving through a collapsing city. They need to know where they're going." "We're going east," I laughed sarcastically. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now, okay, Harriet?" The road ahead bent between two rows of houses. Curtains were closed in some windows, open in others. A television flickered blue in one living room, playing to nobody. A front door stood wide open, rain blowing across hallway tiles. And somewhere close, a burglar alarm wailed and wailed until it became part of the weather. The ordinary details were the ones that made me shudder the most. The trash cans still out from collection day, a child's scooter laying on its side near a garden wall, a takeaway bag split open in the gutter, and a birthday balloon tangled in a hedge, silver letters twisting in the wind. Life had not ended cleanly here. It had been rudely interrupted. From the back, Owen shouted, "Hey, where are we going?" Harriet looked at me, eyebrows raised. I just kept driving. Owen shouted again, louder this time. "Where are we going, Daniel?" The ambulance fell quiet behind me. Even over the engine, I could feel the attention shift. People listening, waiting. I could lie, that was the first thought, and I wish it hadn't come so easily. I could tell them we were heading for another police station, a regional command centre, another hospital outside the city. Something that sounded official enough for frightened people to hold on to. Authority didn't have to be real anymore. It only had to last long enough to keep them calm. But Harriet was beside me, and I was tired of becoming worse in small, slippery steps. "My daughter is trapped across town," I said finally. No one spoke. The ambulance engine filled the silence. Then, Owen said, "What?" "My daughter called me from her mother's house. She's 8 years old. I'm going to get her." The reaction came exactly as I knew it would. A woman in the back started crying, and someone swore. Tom said my name in a voice that sounded almost pleading. Owen moved toward the front partition. One hand braced against the wall. "You're taking us to your kid," he said. "I'm taking this ambulance out of the city," I barked. "Maya is on the way." That was almost true. Almost true is where cowardice likes to hide. Owen laughed once, sharp and humourless. "On the way to where?" I glanced at the broken radio clipped to the dashboard. It hissed with broken traffic, fragments of voices overlapping. "All units, do not approach. Control, we have multiple casualties. Repeat, city centre is not secure. Officer down, officer down. Ambulance control to any available crew." Then, static. "There is no safe destination yet," I said. Owen snorted. "That's convenient." Harriet turned sharply in her seat. "Owen!" she hissed. "No, don't Owen me." His voice shook with anger. "We just left a hospital full of people to die because he said this was our way out. Now he's telling us we're on a school run." The words hit harder than they should have, because they weren't wrong. A school run. Maya in her red coat with the broken zip. Maya walking beside me, holding only 2 of my fingers because she had decided she was too old for holding hands properly. Maya asking whether sharks had best friends. Maya asleep in the back seat on the way home from the museum we were supposed to visit tomorrow. "I am going for my daughter," I said, my voice clipped and final. "Anyone who wants to leave can leave." That shut him up. Not because it was fair, because outside the ambulance, the city moved past in broken, rain-slick fragments, and none of them wanted to step into it. Suddenly, a shape ran across the road ahead. I braked hard. The ambulance skidded, tyres hissing over wet tarmac, and everyone in the back lurched forward. Marcus shifted. The shape hit the passenger side and bounced away into the road. It wasn't an infected. A boy, maybe 16, maybe younger. He had one shoe missing and was soaked through to the skin. He scrambled up from the road with both hands raised. "Please," he screamed. He ran to Harriet's window and slapped both palms against the glass. "Please let me in, please!" Behind him, 3 infected emerged from a side street. Then 5, then more. They were not walking. Harriet looked at me. The boy hammered on the glass, begging to be let inside. His eyes were clear, terrified, but clear. No blood around his mouth, no grey skin that I could see. No bite marks obvious through the rain and darkness. But he was outside. Most of his flesh was hidden under clothes, and Maya was waiting. The infected closed quickly on the ambulance. "Daniel!" Harriet pleaded. I looked away and put the ambulance back into gear. The boy saw my hand move. "No," he gasped. It was such a small word. No. A child's word, a patient's word, a human being refusing to accept that he had been sorted into the wrong category. I drove. He chased us for 6 steps, and I watched him in the side mirror because I deserved to see it. 6 steps, one hand still lifted, mouth open, rain shining on his face. Then the first infected reached him. Harriet turned away. Nobody in the back said a word. I kept driving toward Maya. For the next mile, nobody spoke to me. That was fair, deserved even. Silence settled over the ambulance in a way that felt heavier than shouting. Shouting at least gave anger somewhere to go. Silence stayed with you. It sat beside you, watched your hands on the wheel, and waited for you to explain yourself to the part of your brain that still believed there were lines you would never cross. I'd left a boy in the road to die. There were reasons, good ones even. We had no space. We didn't know if he was bitten. Opening the doors would have drawn the infected directly into the ambulance. The rear compartment was full of injured people, frightened children and medical supplies that had already spilled across the floor. Maya was waiting. Every second mattered. All of that was true. And yet, none of it changed the sound of his hand hitting Harriet's window. "Please, please, please." The wipers dragged rain across the windshield in frantic arcs. The road ahead was a narrow residential street, lined with parked cars on both sides, the kind of street where an ambulance driver would normally slow to a crawl and hope nobody had left their wing mirror out. I took it too fast, clipping the curb twice and knocking over a trash can that burst across the road behind us in a spray of refuse bags and broken glass. Harriet kept her eyes locked forward. I could see her reflection in the side window. Her jaw was clenched, and there was a cut on her cheek from the shattered mirror glass. Thin blood had run down to her chin and dried there dark against her pale skin. "You're bleeding," I said. She didn't answer me. "Harriet!" "I know," she muttered. "You should clean it." That made her look at me. Really look. For a second I saw exactly what she thought of me. Not hatred, that would have been easier. Hatred is simple, but this was worse. This was a woman deciding whether the man beside her was still someone she could trust. "It's a scratch," she said. "Open skin is open skin. Don't, Daniel." The word landed hard. I nodded once and said nothing. Behind us, Priya murmured to one of the children. A low voice, steady rhythm, the kind people use when words matter less than a comforting sound. Tom was still breathing too fast, and I could hear it through the partition. Owen was muttering something to Marcus, but Marcus didn't reply. The city outside flickered between emergency and ordinary. Some houses were dark, some still had lights on. One had every downstairs window smashed and curtains blowing out through the frames. Another had a man standing perfectly still in the upstairs bedroom window, looking down at the road as we passed. He didn't wave, didn't call out. He just watched the ambulance like he was watching the last train leave a station. At the end of the street, I slowed. Not because I wanted to, but because the road ahead was blocked. 3 cars had collided at the junction. A yellow taxi had mounted the sidewalk and hit a lamppost, and a small silver hatchback was sideways across both lanes, HUD crumpled, hazard lights blinking weakly. A 3rd car, a red station wagon, had gone into the side of the hatchback hard enough to fold its front end like paper, and steam rose from the wreckage. The driver of the taxi was still inside. His head rested against the side window at an angle that made my hands tighten on the wheel. He wasn't moving. Not yet. In the silver hatchback, the passenger door was open, and blood streaked the airbag and the inside of the windscreen. The station wagon was worse. A young woman was trapped behind the wheel. She was still alive. I saw her move as our headlights crossed her face. She lifted one hand weakly toward the glass. In the back seat, a child's car seat lay empty. Harriet saw it too. "Daniel." "I know," I said. "We need to turn around." I checked the rearview mirror. The street behind us was still clear, but that meant nothing anymore. Clear changes quickly now. I looked left, a narrow side road, half blocked by a delivery van. Right, a pedestrian cut-through between houses, too narrow for the ambulance. Straight ahead, the crash. The sensible choice was reverse. The fastest choice was forward. The woman in the red station wagon moved again, and her hand pressed against the glass. "Help me." Not spoken, not heard, but I understood it. I had understood it all night. "Can we push through?" Harriet asked. "Maybe. The hatchback is light. If I hit the rear quarter, I might move it enough to squeeze past." "And if you don't?" "Then we're stuck." Harriet looked toward the red estate. "She's alive." "Yes," I said. The words scraped on the way out. In the back, Owen called forward. "Why have we stopped?" "Crash," Harriet muttered. "Can we get around it?" Owen asked. I didn't answer. The woman in the station wagon turned her head. Slowly. Too slowly. Her mouth opened and closed around something I couldn't hear through the rain, glass and engine noise. Then something small moved behind the taxi. Not infected, a child, maybe 4 years old, wearing pyjamas under a coat, bare feet on wet tarmac. She stepped out from behind the taxi, holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Harriet made a sound like someone had punched the air from her chest. The child looked at the ambulance, then at the woman still trapped in the car. "Mummy!" she screamed. She ran toward the car. At the same moment, the taxi driver's head lifted from the window, and his eyes flicked open. Milky and wrong. The seatbelt held him for 1 second. Then 2. Then his hands came up and began clawing at the buckle. Harriet was already opening her door. I grabbed her sleeve. "No," I hissed. She shook me off, furious now. "She's a child." "I know." "Daniel, she's a child." "I know," I shouted. The taxi driver's seatbelt clicked open. The dead man fell sideways against the driver's door, face pressed to the glass, jaw opening and closing. The little girl had reached her mother's car and was trying to open the door. The trapped woman inside the station wagon began thrashing weakly, not because she was infected, but because she could see what was about to happen and could do nothing to stop it. For one awful second, nobody moved. Then Marcus shoved past the partition from the rear compartment. "Open the side door," he said. "No," Owen snapped. "Are you mad?" Marcus ignored him and looked at me. "Open it." "We open that door and everything nearby hears us," I protested. "Everything already heard us," Marcus said. Outside, the taxi driver slammed his head against the window once, then twice. The glass cracked around his forehead. Harriet reached for the door handle again. I looked at the little girl. I looked at the road ahead. I looked at the phone in the cup holder. Maya's voicemail now sat on the screen like an accusation. "Dad, can you come home now?" I took a deep breath and unlocked the ambulance doors. Marcus moved before anyone could argue. He threw the side door open and jumped down with the fire axe in both hands. Harriet went after him. I swore, put the ambulance in park, and followed. The rain hit me cold and hard as I stepped out of the door. The world outside smelled of petrol, hot metal and blood. "Get the child!" I shouted. Harriet was already moving. She ran low and fast across the front of the ambulance and toward the little girl. Marcus went for the taxi. The infected driver hit the window a third time and the glass gave way. Not shattered completely, just enough. His head forced through the broken pane, scalp peeling back as the jagged glass cut into skin that no longer cared. His teeth snapped at the air. Marcus reached the taxi and swung the axe into the side of the driver's head. The blade bit deep and the driver stopped moving. For half a second, I thought that was it. Then his hands kept clawing at the door. Marcus stood and stared, his jaw dropping open. "Head!" I shouted. "Again!" Marcus ripped the axe free and swung harder. This time the skull gave way with a sound I felt more than I heard. The driver went still. Harriet grabbed the little girl around the waist, just as she reached the red car. The child kicked and screamed, arms reaching for her mother. "Mummy! Mummy!" The woman in the station wagon pressed both palms to the window, and blood ran down the side of her face from somewhere under her hairline. Her eyes found mine. Clear, human, trapped. I went to her door. I shouldn't have. I knew it even then. But there are limits to what a person can drive past before they stop being a person at all. The door was crushed inward, jammed against the folded front panel. I pulled once. Nothing. I pulled again, harder this time, and the metal groaned, but it still didn't move. The woman stared at me through the glass. "My ankle," she gasped. "I know. Stay still." That was a lie. I didn't know. I couldn't assess anything properly through a cracked window in the rain with the city collapsing around us. Harriet reached the ambulance with the child, and Owen pulled them inside. The girl screamed the whole way. Marcus stood near the taxi, axe raised, scanning the street. "Daniel," he whispered. Not loud, that made it worse. I glanced over my shoulder and looked past him. Shapes were appearing at the end of the road behind us, drawn in by the engine, by the screaming child, drawn by us. The woman in the car saw them reflected in her mirror. "No," she cried. I pulled the door again. Still nothing. "Daniel," Marcus said again, his voice louder with urgency. "I need something to lever it." "We don't have time," he hissed. "There's a child in the ambulance who needs her mother," I said. "There's a child across town who needs her father." That stopped me in my tracks. Marcus had not meant it cruelly. That almost made it worse. The woman in the car began to cry. Not sobbing, no time for that. Just tears mixing with rain through the cracked side window. "What's your name?" I asked, and she blinked at me. "What?" Your name. Laura. Laura, listen to me. I need you to listen carefully. Her eyes moved past me to the infected gathering in a horde at the end of the road. Your daughter is in the ambulance. No. She's safe. For now. No, please. I put one hand flat against the glass. It was the wrong side of the glass. That was the truth of the night. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Laura understood before I moved. Her face changed. Not anger at first, but betrayal, and then terror. Then something that looked horribly like hatred. Don't leave me, she begged. The infected started running behind us. Marcus grabbed my shoulder and pulled, and I stumbled back from the car. Laura screamed then, not for help, not for rescue, for her daughter. Lily! The little girl's name cut through the rain. From inside the ambulance, the child was still screaming for her mother. But I climbed into the driver's seat, with Laura's voice still tearing itself apart behind me. Harriet was in the back now, holding the child. Owen slammed the side door shut as soon as Marcus jumped in and hammered twice against the partition. Go! Well, I slammed the ambulance into drive. The road ahead was still blocked. The road behind was filling with infected. The ambulance hit the silver hatchback hard enough to throw everybody sideways. Metal screamed and the hatchback shifted 1/2 metre, tyres dragging across the road. But it wasn't enough. I reversed 3 feet, then hit it again. This time the hatchback spun just enough to open a gap between its rear bumper and the streetlight. It was still too narrow, but I took it anyway. The ambulance forced through with a long, tearing scrape down both sides. The station wagon rocked as we passed. Laura was still alive when we left her. I saw her in the mirror, face pressed to the broken window, mouth still open around her daughter's name. Then the infected reached the car. I looked away, not soon enough. In the back, Lily screamed until her voice broke, but no one told her to be quiet, not even me. For the second time in less than 10 minutes, I drove away from someone I could not save. This time, though, I took her child with me, and somehow that felt even worse. Lily stopped screaming after 10 minutes. That wasn't better. Screaming meant there was still some part of her fighting the shape the night had taken. Silence meant shock had finally got its hands around her. I could see her in the mirror when the ambulance passed under streetlights, her small face pressed into Harriet's scrub top, and one bare foot tucked beneath her. One hand still clutched the stuffed rabbit she'd carried from the wreck, but her mother's blood was soaked onto the rabbit's ear. I tried not to look at it. There were too many things I was trying not to look at by then. The road widened as we left the residential streets and joined the old ring road that cut around the edge of the town centre. Normally, that road was ugly but useful. Gas station, storage units, tyre garage, 2 takeouts, a discount furniture warehouse, and a row of office blocks that nobody ever seemed to enter or leave. At night, it became a corridor of sodium lights and wet tarmac. Tonight, it was an obstacle course built from abandoned lives. Cars had been left at angles across both lanes, some with doors open, some still idling. One had crashed into the central barrier and burned down to its frame, the rain hissing against blackened metal. A bus stood sideways at the junction ahead, destination still glowing. City centre. It wouldn't be going there. A man sat on the roof of the bus in a dressing gown, knees drawn to his chest, arms wrapped around them. He watched us pass without moving. I don't know if he was alive in any useful way anymore. He didn't call out, didn't wave. He just sat above the road like someone waiting for a flood to reach him. The ambulance felt different now. At the hospital, it had been an escape vehicle, a desperate thing. Too many people in too small a space, but moving, and movement had felt like salvation. Now, it felt like a container full of judgment. Every turn I took, every person I drove past, every blocked road I rejected was being weighed behind me by people who had trusted me because there had been no time not to. That trust was thinning. I felt it in the way nobody asked questions directly anymore. In the small movements behind the partition, in the pauses whenever I slowed. In the way Owen kept looking through the rear windows, counting exits, calculating his chances if he decided I was more dangerous than the dead. Maybe he was right to. Harriet had stayed in the back with Lily, and now Priya had taken the front passenger seat, though she sat angled partly toward me and partly toward the survivors in the back, as if she could keep the whole ambulance in one piece by watching it hard enough. She had cleaned the cut on Harriet's cheek with saline. She checked Lily for bites. There were none. She checked everybody else again, quickly and brutally, under the weak interior light while I drove. No new bites, no obvious breaks, just bruises, cuts, panic, shock and grief. The ordinary injuries of an extraordinary night. Tom had stopped shaking now, and that worried me more than the shaking had. He sat on the floor near the rear doors with the airway bag between his knees, staring at nothing. I'd seen that look before in junior doctors after their first bad death. The moment medicine stopped being clever and became bodies, blood, and families in corridors. But what Tom had seen tonight was worse than death. He'd seen medicine end. We passed the gas station on the left. The forecourt lights were still on, bright enough to hurt my eyes. 3 cars waited at the pumps, and one had crashed nose first into the shop window. Inside, shelves lay spilled across the floor. Chips, magazines, bottles of oil, bright packets of sweets scattered under emergency lighting. A figure moved inside the shop. Then another. Then several more, turning slowly toward the sound of the ambulance engine. I just kept driving. The fuel gauge needle sat just below half. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. Half a tank felt like a lot if you were driving home after work. It felt like nothing when roads were blocked, engines idled, and every wrong turn might cost 20 minutes we didn't have. Maya's mother lived in Brookmere. It wasn't far, that was the cruelty of it. On an ordinary night with clear roads and green lights, I could drive from St Anne's to Brookmere in 18 minutes. 25 if traffic was bad. I'd made the journey hundreds of times since the divorce. Drop-offs, pick-ups, forgotten school shoes, last-minute birthday arrangements, the complicated choreography of separated parents trying to pretend they were still a functioning system. Tonight, Brookmere might as well have been in another country. I knew 3 routes. The fast route went through the town centre. I shook my head. No chance. The sensible route took the bypass and cut in near a retail park. Probably blocked. The 3rd route went through an old service road behind the industrial estate, then cut across the canal bridge into Brookmere from the west. It was narrow, ugly and poorly lit. The kind of route taxi drivers knew and sat-navs discovered too late. I chose the 3rd. Not because it was the safest, but because it was the least obvious. The infected followed noise. So did the desperate. Main roads would collect both. Priya looked at the phone map glowing in my hand as I slowed near a roundabout. The signal came and went, little grey tiles loading in blocks as if the city itself was being revealed reluctantly. No traffic data, no emergency alerts that made sense, just a map pretending roads were still roads. "Brookmere?" she asked. One word, quiet. I nodded. She didn't ask if Maya was still alive. That was kindness. Or maybe she just already knew the answer I would give. The roundabout ahead was partially blocked by a delivery lorry that had jackknifed across the second exit. Its rear doors hung open. Plastic crates lay spilled across the road. Milk, bread, fruit, packets of something frozen now thawing in the rain. People had tried to loot it. Some had died doing it. Bodies lay around the back of the lorry in strange positions, one face down near the crates, one half under the rear wheels. One sitting upright against the curb, with its head tilted back and rain falling into its open mouth. As our headlights swept over them, 2 began to move. Then a 3rd. I took the first exit before they could stand, and the ambulance swayed hard. Something crashed into the rear compartment. Lily whimpered, but did not scream. We entered the industrial estate through a gap in a chain-link fence, where a security gate had been rammed open. The sign beside it read, Merrow Business Park. I'd been there once, years earlier, for a minor injury call-out when I was still doing shifts as a registrar. A warehouse worker had taken the tip off a finger in a packaging machine and apologised to me all the way to the hospital for wasting people's time. People apologised for pain in hospitals. They apologised for bleeding on floors. They apologised for needing help. Tonight, nobody apologised. There was nobody left to receive it. The estate was darker than the roads. Large units sat back from the tarmac behind fences and roller shutters. Security lights flicked on as we passed, one after another, triggered by the ambulance's movement. The sudden pools of white light made everything jump. Pallets, bins, forklift trucks, plastic sheeting flapping in the wind. At the third unit, something slammed against a metal shutter from inside. A deep boom, then another, then many hands. We drove on. No one spoke, but that suited me. Speech costs energy when everyone is afraid, but it also makes things real. If nobody said Laura's name, then maybe Lily's mother remained a woman in a car behind us, rather than a decision I had made. If nobody said the boy from the road, maybe he stayed a shadow in a mirror. If nobody said Maya, then maybe she stayed a destination, rather than a child who might already be gone. The service road narrowed between two warehouses. Water pooled deep in the dips, throwing dirty spray over the windshield as we passed. The wipers smeared more than cleared, and I slowed, not because I wanted to, but forced by lack of visibility. That was when the radio crackled properly for the first time in 20 minutes. Not static, a voice. All surviving units, avoid Central St. Anne's. I repeat, avoid Central St. Anne's. Fire has spread to the East Wing. Multiple casualties. Unknown number infected. Military support requested but not confirmed. Police command relocating to Northbridge Station. Civilian safe point reported at Northbridge Library. Unverified, I repeat, unverified. The message broke apart, then repeated fragments. Northbridge. The library was north of us, away from Brookmere. Everyone in the ambulance heard the message, and I felt the silence sharpen. Owen moved first. His face appeared in the small partition gap, pale under dried blood and emergency light. Northbridge, his expression said. He didn't need to say it out loud. I just kept my eyes on the road. Next to me, Priya looked down at a map, then at me. Brookmere was east, entirely the opposite direction, and one road did not serve both directions for long. I drove straight past the turning for Northbridge. Behind me, someone gasped like they had been struck. Owen shouted my name, but I didn't answer. The ambulance continued through the business park, away from the only reported safe point in the city, and toward my daughter's street. I could feel the group change behind me. Not loudly, not all at once, but it changed. Fear needed somewhere to attach itself, and I had given it a person. Me. At the next bend, a forklift truck blocked half the lane. Its forks were raised at chest height, a pallet still balanced awkwardly across them. I edged the ambulance around it, wheels dropping into the mud verge. Priya grabbed the handle above the door, and metal scraped beneath us. For one sickening second, I thought we were stuck. Then the rear wheels caught and pulled us free. Beyond the forklift, the service road descended toward the canal, and the bridge came into view. And with it, another obstacle between me and Maya. A crowd stood on the bridge. Not infected. People. Maybe 30 of them, maybe more. Men, women, teenagers. One elderly man in a dressing gown. 2 people with backpacks. 3 with kitchen knives and 1 holding what looked like a baseball bat. They had dragged bins, traffic cones and a motorbike across the bridge to block vehicles. A makeshift checkpoint, if you will, built by frightened people who had decided that a narrow bridge was easier to defend than a street. For 1 second, hope flared inside me. Living people, organised people, a defended route into Brookmere. Then I saw the way they looked at the ambulance. Not relief, need. That was worse. Need takes whatever it can get hold of. I slowed the ambulance 20 metres from the barricade, and Priya's hand moved toward the door lock. Good. The crowd began moving before we stopped. Some came forward with raised hands, and some stayed behind the barricade. One man in a dark coat stepped out ahead of the others, palms open, trying to look calm. He failed because the knife in his right hand caught the light. I stopped the ambulance but kept the engine running, and rain drummed on the roof as the man in the coat approached the driver's side. I cracked the window open 2 inches. Not enough for a hand, but just enough for words. He asked if we had fuel. I said barely. He asked if we could take people north. I just shook my head. his face hardened by degrees. Behind him, the crowd pressed closer, and I could see injuries now. A bandaged head, blood on one woman's sleeve, a boy holding his arm strangely. Nobody obviously bitten, but obvious had stopped meaning safe. The man looked past me into the ambulance, at the children, at the supplies, at the uniforms. That was the problem. An ambulance didn't look like a person trying to survive. It looked like rescue. It looked like authority. It looked like a promise we could not keep. "We're holding the bridge," the man said. "I can see that," I nodded. "Nobody is crossing unless you help us. Give us some of what's in the back there." I looked at the barricade. Bins, cones and a motorbike. 2 men behind it with lengths of wood. It would slow a car. It wouldn't stop infected for long, though. It might stop an ambulance if I cared about damage. I did care, just not enough. In the back, Lily made a small sound. The man heard it and his eyes shifted again. "How many children have you got in there?" he asked. That was when Marcus appeared behind me, visible through the side window of the rear compartment. He didn't speak. He just stood there, fire axe lowered but ready, shoulders filling the narrow space. The man in the coat took a step back, raising his arms warily. "Good." Then someone in the crowd shouted. The sound came from the far end of the bridge first, a scream, then another. The crowd turned, and headlights revealed movement behind them on the Brookmere side. Infected were coming down the road toward the bridge. Not many, but enough that the careful shape of the checkpoint collapsed in seconds. People shoved toward the ambulance. The man in the coat hit the side window with his palm, not begging now, but demanding to be let on board. Someone climbed onto the hood. Another grabbed the rear door handle, but Owen shouted from inside, and Marcus grabbed the inside of the door. I had maybe 3 seconds before the crowd became a mob. Maybe less. The barricade was ahead, people between us and it. The bridge beyond, Maya beyond that. I pressed on the horn, long and brutal, and the noise blasted across the canal and through the crowd. Some flinched away. Some did not. I put the ambulance into gear. Priya's head snapped toward me. There was no judgment in her face now, only understanding. Not approval, just understanding. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, and the people at the front scattered, diving out of the way. The man on the hood fell sideways, rolled and vanished beneath the headlight line. I don't know if the ambulance hit him. I didn't care at that point, and I wasn't stopping to find out. The front bumper hit the bins first, and they burst apart, spraying garbage across the bridge. The motorbike went under the left wheel with a metal crunch that lifted the ambulance and threw it sideways. For one awful moment, we drifted toward the low metal barrier of the bridge and the black canal water beyond it. I fought the wheel. The rear end clipped something hard, and the ambulance fishtailed. People screamed outside and inside, and the engine roared. But then, the tyres caught. We cleared the barricade, and behind us the crowd spilled in every direction. Some fled the infected, some chased us, some simply stood still because fear had cut the strings. The bridge narrowed toward the centre. On the far side, 3 infected were already on the road. One wore a cycling helmet cracked down the middle. One was a woman in a supermarket uniform. One had no shirt and black veins spread across his chest like roots. There was no room to avoid them. So I just accelerated. The cyclist went sideways into the bridge wall, and the woman disappeared beneath the front bumper. The shirtless one hit the windshield hard enough to crack it from corner to corner. Blood sprayed over the glass and was smeared across the pane by the wipers. His face stayed there, teeth snapping, eyes milky and burning with inhuman desire. I braked on instinct, and the body slid down the hood and vanished beneath us. For one heartbeat, the bridge was behind us. Brookmere was ahead. Then the ambulance headlights suddenly died. The dashboard flickered, the radio snapped into static. The cabin lights blinked off, then on, then off again, and a warning tone sounded. The engine coughed. "No!" I pleaded, slapping the side of the wheel. The word came out before I could stop it. The engine coughed again and power dipped, the steering wheel going heavy under my hands. Damage from the barrier, the cars, the motorbike, the bodies. Too much, too fast. The ambulance had survived more than a vehicle had any right to do, and battled on, and now it was telling me that the debt had come true. I forced the ambulance on, 100 metres, 50, 20. The engine died outside Brookmere Elementary School, and the ambulance rolled silently to a stop beside the railings. Rain ticked against the broken windscreen. For a moment, nobody moved. The sudden quiet was enormous. I turned the key. Nothing. Again, a click. Again, a weaker click. Priya whispered my name. I turned the key one more time because denial is not rational, it's muscle memory. But there was nothing. The ambulance was dead. Maya's house was still 6 streets away. We took everything useful. There was no debate now. Debate belonged to people with choices. We had a dead ambulance, a damaged bridge behind us, infected somewhere in the rain, and 6 streets between me and my daughter. 6 streets, close enough to be unbearable. Close is worse than far when you're afraid. Far lets you think in routes and timings and fuel. Close strips all that away, until distance becomes doorways, corners and breaths. Maya was not across the city anymore. She was beyond the school railings, past the shops, down the hill, maybe sitting under her bed with her hands over her ears, maybe hiding in the cupboard beneath the stairs where she used to keep her art projects because my ex-wife Claire never threw anything away. Maybe waiting at the top landing because she still thought I would come through the door. Maybe not. I didn't let the last thought finish. Marcus opened the rear doors carefully. Rain blew into the ambulance, carrying the smell of wet leaves, gasoline and smoke. He stepped down first, axe in hand, and scanned the street. Priya passed him a torch. The beam cut across the school gates, the painted sign, the small playground beyond. Empty swings moved in the wind. One squeaked softly, back and forth, back and forth. Lily made a small sound and buried her face into Harriet's side. We unloaded quickly. Water bottles, dressings, 2 blankets, a torch with weak batteries, and 3 mobile phones with no reliable signal and less battery than hope required. 14 people had left St. Anne's. 14 people now stood in the rain, beside a smashed-up, dead ambulance in an elementary school, trying not to look as lost as they were. Inside the ambulance, bodies had filled space. Outside, under the wide, dark sky, we were just a handful of people with hospital lanyards, blood on our clothes, and nowhere safe to stand. Owen lifted the hood, stared at the engine, then closed it again without a word. That told everyone what we needed to know. Now we walked. I knew the streets from here, left at the school, past the shops, across Wren Avenue and down the hill. Maya's mother, Claire, lived on Alder Row. Number 19, blue door, bay window, small front garden with lavender she always forgot to cut back, and a ridiculous ceramic fox that Maya had chosen from a garden centre because she thought it looked lonely. I could see it so clearly that for a second I nearly convinced myself I was already there. Suddenly, a distant scream came from the direction of the bridge, and everyone turned. Sound travelled strangely in the rain. It bounced between houses and came back thinner, stretched out and robbed of direction. We moved fast. Marcus at the front, me just behind him, Priya with the torch, Harriet carrying Lily, then the others, and Owen bringing up the rear. I didn't give a speech, that's for films and funerals. We just needed speed and silence, so I gave rules. Stay close, no lights unless needed, no shouting, no phones. If anything moves, stop first. If anyone is bitten, say it immediately. Nobody asked what would happen then. The first street was empty, but empty didn't mean safe. I knew that now. Empty could mean evacuated. It could mean hiding. It could even mean dead. It could mean something had already moved through and left nothing behind worth chasing. Curtains twitched as we passed one house. A face appeared briefly in an upstairs window, then vanished. Someone alive in there. Someone watching 14 people walk through the rain and choosing, as I had chosen, not to open a door. I hated them for a second. Then I understood them. Brookmere Parade came next. 6 little shops beneath apartments, glass smashed on all. The convenience store was open, too open. Bright interior lights spilled onto the sidewalk. The aisles inside were wrecked, shelves stripped, freezer cabinet doors hanging open. A trail of muddy footprints led across spilled rice and broken eggs. There were bodies near the counter. I counted 3. Then one moved. Marcus raised the axe. The figure pushed itself up on one elbow. But he was not infected. A man, maybe later 20s, face swollen and one eye closed. He saw us and lifted a hand weakly, but no one moved toward him. That's where we were now. A living man on the floor of a shop lifted a hand for help, and 14 people stood in the rain, calculating whether compassion would kill them. Priya took half a step, but I caught her wrist and shook my head. Her face hardened, but she didn't pull away. The man watched us leave him, and I added him to the part of myself I intended to never examine. Halfway across Wren Avenue, Owen's radio hissed alive. The sudden noise made everyone jump out of their skin, and a voice broke through, distant and broken. "Brookmere units, fall back. Multiple infected moving south from Canal. Residential reports on Alder Row, Finch Street, Marlow Drive." Alder Row. My body reacted before my mind did. I stopped walking, and the group bunched behind me. The radio dissolved into static now, and nobody said Maya's name. They didn't have to. I started moving faster, but Harriet caught the back of my scrub top and pulled me hard enough to turn me. Her face was inches from mine in the rain. Not angry this time, but afraid. Not for herself, but for what I was becoming now that we were close. I wanted to tell her that I was fine, that I understood the risk, that I wouldn't run blind into a street of infected and get everyone killed. But my daughter's street had just come through the radio, and all of the reasonable parts of me were burning away. Marcus stepped between me and the road ahead. Not blocking me exactly, just existing in the space that I needed to pass through. "Daniel," he grunted. Low, a warning. I forced myself to breathe. Doctors are good at seeming calm while their bodies betray them privately. "I'm good," I promised. Marcus gave me a curt nod, and we continued. Slower, not slow, but slower than before. At the corner of Finch Street, we found the police cars that Maya's voicemail had mentioned. 2 of them. One mounted the sidewalk with its front bumper buried in a hedge, and the other stopped diagonally across the road, driver's door open, blue lights still flashing silently. No siren, just the pulse of blue across wet brick and black windows. A police officer lay in the road beside the open door. There was no head movement, no visible breathing, just one arm stretched toward the gutter. His baton lay 2 meters away. The second officer was inside the car, but not in the driver's seat. He was laid out across the back, bent at an angle that no living body would choose. The rear window was smeared dark from the inside. I looked beyond the police cars. Alder Row, number 19, less than 2 minutes away. The group waited at the corner. Nobody told me to be careful. Nobody asked whether this was worth it. We'd crossed the line where those questions were useful. Marcus came with me. Priya came too. The others stayed by the police cars with Harriet and Owen, watching both ends of the street. I crossed the road toward number 19. The house looked exactly the same and completely ruined all at once. The blue door stood open, not wide, just enough. A black shape of hallway laid beyond. The porch light flickered above, and the ceramic fox still stood in the front garden, rain running down its painted orange face. There was blood on the doorframe. Not much, 3 streaks at shoulder height. A hand grabbed there, slid, then vanished inside. I stopped at the threshold, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The air smelled wrong. Not death, not yet. It smelled of wet carpet, cold tea perfume, and something metallic underneath. The kind of smell you notice before you understand it. Priya clicked the torch on and covered most of the beam with her fingers, letting only a thin strip of light spill across the hall. Shoes scattered by the stairs, a school bag against the radiator. The little table by the door had been knocked sideways, letters and keys spilled beneath it. Claire's keys. I recognised the blue keyring Maya had made from plastic beads. The letters uneven, the Y reversed. Maya. My throat closed. The living room door was open on the left, and Priya turned the light beam through it. It was empty. The television was on, but muted, light bouncing over the walls. Emergency broadcast text scrolled beneath a frozen image of a government representative, whose face had become a blurred rectangle of compression and panic. The sofa cushions were on the floor. A glass lay broken near the fireplace. One of Maya's blankets had been dragged halfway across the room. Pink fleece covered in cartoon stars. No Maya, no Claire. I checked the kitchen next. Marcus went first, nudging the door with the axe handle. It opened 3 inches, then stopped against something soft. We all froze. The torch beam dropped to the gap, and a hand lay on the tiles. Female, pale fingers, wedding ring gone, but the mark was still there. It was Claire. I knew before I saw her face. The body knows some truths before the mind will sign for them. For a moment, there was no sound in the world. Not rain, not the distant dead, not even my own breathing. Then Priya whispered my name. I pushed the kitchen door gently until the gap widened enough to see. Claire was on the floor between the counter and the back door. One leg was folded beneath her and one arm stretched toward the hallway. Blood darkened the front of her jumper and spread beneath her across the floor tiles. Her face was turned toward us, eyes open. Clear, not milky. Human. Dead human. That distinction mattered now, and the fact that it mattered made something inside me fold in on itself. I'd not loved Claire anymore, not in the way I once had, but she was Maya's mother. She had taught Maya to plait her own hair. She knew exactly how much ketchup to put beside chips without the plate becoming unacceptable. She kept every ugly craft project because she understood that children watch what you keep. And she died reaching for the hall. Reaching for Maya. I stepped toward her and Marcus put himself in front of me. For 1 second, I hated him. Then, Claire's fingers twitched. Small, almost nothing, but enough. Priya's torch jerked as Marcus raised the axe. I couldn't move. Claire's hand curled against the tile, her jaw opening and closing. But no breath came with it. Her eyes changed as I watched. Not all at once, that would have been easier. A clouding first, a milkiness spreading from the centre outward. The last of Claire leaving. I heard a sound and realised it was me. Not a word, not a sob, just a broken sound trying to get out. Marcus looked at me. There was apology in his face, but not hesitation. He stepped into the kitchen and swung the axe once. The sound was dull, final. Priya turned the torch away and I stared at the floor, at the blood, at Claire's hand. Then, from somewhere above us, came the smallest sound. A thump. Not loud, not infected. A tiny, frightened movement. The house changed around me, and my head snapped toward the stairs. Maya! I moved before Marcus could stop me. The staircase was narrow, carpeted and familiar, and my feet knew the creak on the 4th step and avoided it automatically. Some useless domestic memory, still alive at the end of the world. Priya followed behind me with the torch low, and Marcus came last, axe at the ready. At the top landing, there were 3 doors. Bathroom, Claire's room, Maya's room. The bathroom door stood open, discarded towels on the floor, and a smear of blood on the light switch. Maya's door was half open. A paper sign hung from it, taped at child height. Maya's room. Keep out, unless you're mum or dad. The letters were purple, the apostrophe in the wrong place. She'd drawn a shark underneath with a smile of sharp rectangular teeth. I reached for the doorway and stopped. The room was dark except for the torch beam. It slid across a bed with a duvet bunched on the floor, a bookshelf, a small desk, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the wardrobe door hanging open. No Maya. The bed was empty. The gap underneath was empty. The wardrobe held clothes, 1 sneaker and a plastic dinosaur, but no child. My heart began to beat so hard it hurt. Priya moved the torch across the floor. There were marks on the carpet. Small footprints, not blood. Mud. Leading from the door to the landing, then back again, then stopping near the cupboard built into the wall beside the bed. The cupboard was small, meant for spare blankets and the old boiler pipes that clanked in winter. Maya used to hide there when she was younger, though she was never very good at it. She'd pull the door closed and then giggle before anyone had started looking. The door was shut, and I just stared at it. Every terrible possibility in the world stood between me and that handle. If she wasn't there, I didn't know what would be left of me. If she was there and bitten, I didn't know what I would do. If she was there and changed, I knew exactly what Marcus would have to do, and that knowledge nearly put me on my knees. Priya put one hand on my arm, not holding me back, but holding me together. I crouched in front of the cupboard, placing my hand on the cupboard door. "Maya," I whispered. No answer. My voice nearly failed on the second try. "Maya, it's Dad." Silence. I closed my eyes. Please. I had not prayed once at the hospital. Not when Rob died. Not when the waiting room turned. Not when we ran through the mortuary corridor. Not even when Laura screamed her daughter's name from the car. Now, kneeling in front of a cupboard in my daughter's bedroom, I prayed without words to anything that might still be listening. Then, a tiny voice came from behind the door. "Prove it." The sound that left me was almost a laugh and almost grief and completely useless. Priya covered her mouth with one hand and Marcus lowered the axe. I leaned closer to the cupboard door before I spoke. "Your favourite shark is the goblin shark," I whispered, "but only because you think it looks like it knows secrets." A pause. "And you hate mushrooms because you said they taste like wet rubber." Another pause. "You sleep with one foot outside the blanket, even when it's freezing." "You don't think I know, but I do." The cupboard door opened 1 inch. An eye appeared in the gap, wide and red from crying. It was alive. It was human. Maya! For half a second, neither of us moved. Then she opened the door and threw herself at me, so hard I nearly fell backward. She was shaking. Her arms locked around my neck, and her face nuzzled into my shoulder. She smelled of sweat, dust, toothpaste, and fear, and I held her too tightly and knew it, but I couldn't make myself loosen my grip. She was alive. My daughter was alive. Everything I'd done, every road I'd taken, person I'd left behind, every door I'd not opened, and every dirty look Harriet had given me, it all crashed into that one impossible fact. Maya was alive. I checked her anyway. Hands first, wrists, arms, neck, face. She tried to cling harder, but I made myself be gentle and thorough. Doctor and father fighting for space in the same ruined body. No bites, a bruise on her shoulder, a scratch on her knee, but definitely no bites. Priya looked at me and nodded once. Only then did I breathe properly. From downstairs came a soft knock. Not against the door, against glass. Once, then again. We all froze. It was coming from the bay window. Something had found the front of the house. Another knock, a hand against glass. Slow and testing, like the barefoot man from back in Bay 2. Maya's arms tightened around my neck, and Priya switched off the torch. Darkness fell hard, and for a few seconds the only light came from the glow in the dark stars on Maya's ceiling. Marcus moved to the landing and looked down. He came back almost immediately and held up 3 fingers pointing to the stairs. 3 at the front, maybe more coming. The group outside was still waiting by the police cars. Harriet, Lily, Tom, the rest of them. Every minute we stayed in the house, we put them at risk too. I lifted Maya. She was heavier than I expected. Her legs wrapped around my waist, arms locked around my neck. I could feel every tremor running through her. We left her room with the torch off. At the top of the stairs, I looked down into the hallway. Blue police light pulsed through the frosted glass, and shadows moved across it. 1, 2, 3, a 4th shape appeared beyond the living room window. The front route was gone. Priya pointed toward Claire's bedroom. The rear garden, of course. There was a small, flat roof above the kitchen, reachable from the bedroom window. From there, a drop into the garden. Not ideal, but not impossible. I carried Maya into Claire's bedroom. I tried not to look at the bed, the laundry basket, or the dressing gown hanging behind the door. The life that had continued here without me after the divorce. The life that had ended downstairs on the kitchen tiles. Priya opened the window slowly, but it stuck halfway. The sound seemed impossibly loud. Downstairs, glass cracked, and Marcus crossed the room and forced the window open higher with both hands. Rain blew in and cold air filled the room. He climbed out first onto the flat roof, moving carefully across the slick surface. Priya went next. Then I passed Maya through the window. For a second, she wouldn't let go of me. I whispered that I would be right behind her, and she looked at me in the rain, searching my face for the sort of lie adults tell children when there's no time left. I held her gaze. "I'll be right behind you, baby bear." She let Priya take her, and I climbed out last. Behind me, something heavy hit the bottom of the stairs, and I knew that the front door had given in. The roof was slick beneath my hospital shoes, and the garden below was dark, fenced on both sides, with Claire's little patio table overturned near the back door. Beyond the rear fence ran an alley that connected the gardens along Alder Row. Marcus dropped first. He landed badly, but stayed on his feet. Priya lowered Maya down to him, then she climbed, hung from the roof edge, and dropped. I followed, pain shooting through both knees as I hit the patio. Maya was back in my arms before I'd fully straightened. She was looking through the kitchen window. I turned before I could stop myself and saw Claire still lying on the kitchen floor. Still, really still now. I had no goodbye for her, no apology that mattered, so I gave her the only thing I had left to give. I took her daughter and ran. The back gate was locked, and Marcus hit it with his shoulder. The wood cracked but held. The second hit tore the latch from the frame and sent the gate banging into the alley. The sound brought a groan from somewhere to the left, then another from the right. The alley was not empty. Shapes moved between trash cans and garden walls. We turned right. It wasn't clear, but it led back toward the police cars, the survivors, and the only people I hadn't completely abandoned yet. Maya clung to me, face buried into my neck as I carried her through the alley. Marcus took front, axe raised. Priya stayed behind me, one hand on my back whenever the ground dipped or trash shifted underfoot. The infected in the alley were slow to react at first. Then Maya made a tiny sound against my shoulder. Heads turned, feet scraped, hands reached from the dark. Marcus struck one across the face with the axe, handle rather than blade, shoving it into a fence. Another came from the garden gate on the left. Priya kicked its knee sideways with a crack that made my stomach turn, then pushed me forward. We reached the alley exit behind the police cars, just as the first infected from the front of the house spilled back into Alder Row. Harriet saw Maya in my arms, and for one brief second her face changed. Relief. Then the street erupted. The infected at number 19 turned toward the group. The ones from the alley followed us out. More shapes moved beyond the police lights, drawn by the bridge, the voices, the night itself finally tightening around us. There was no time for reunion, no time for tears, no time to explain Claire. I passed Maya to Harriet because I needed both hands free, and because Harriet was the closest thing to safety that I still trusted. Maya tried to hold on to me. I peeled her fingers from my scrub top, one by one. The look she gave me almost undid everything, but I gave her one word. Go. She went because Harriet carried her. We moved down Alder Row, away from number 19, away from Claire, and away from the open blue door and the ceramic fox in the rain. Owen led now, baton in hand, using the police cars as cover, before cutting through a side passage between houses. No one screamed. That saved us. The side passage opened onto a narrow lane behind the houses. At the far end, I could see the school railings, and beyond them, the dead shape of the ambulance beside the road. The ambulance was useless, but beyond it was the road north. Northbridge, the safe point, unverified, maybe false, maybe already gone. Still more than we had right now. We ran for it. Not all at once, not cleanly. A staggered, exhausted flight through rain and darkness. Behind us, the infected poured into the lane. Not fast enough at first, then faster as the sound of our movement gathered them. I dropped back without meaning to. Or maybe I did mean to. Marcus was beside me, Priya too. The three of us formed the rear without discussing it. There was no heroic moment, no speech, just the ugly practical business of keeping the dead a few steps behind the living. The school railings came closer, and the dead ambulance waited beside them like a monument to the part of the night we'd survived. Harriet reached it first with the children. Maya twisted in her arms, searching for me, and our eyes met across the rain. For 1 second, I saw her face clearly. Not the frightened voice on the voicemail, not the possibility in my head. My daughter, alive, waiting. I ran harder. Behind me, something caught the back of my scrub top. Fingers closed in on the fabric. I stumbled. Marcus turned and swung the axe. The grip vanished. But it was too late. I hit the ground hard, shoulder first, pain flaring white-hot across my ribs. Priya grabbed one arm, and Marcus grabbed the other. Together they hauled me upright. There was no time to thank them, no breath to waste. We reached the ambulance as the first infected spilled from the lane. Owen had found the service road beyond the school, a narrow pedestrian route wide enough for people, not vehicles, running behind the playing fields toward the north side of Brookmere. He pointed once. That was enough. We left the ambulance behind again, for good this time, and I took Maya from Harriet. My daughter wrapped herself around me, and I held her with one arm, while the other pressed against my aching ribs. We moved north. In the distance, there was a colossal bang, and the infected's head snapped toward the source of the sound. Mercifully, they changed direction, and we ran into the darkness. The rain softened the world behind us. Alder Road disappeared first, then the police lights, then the outline of Claire's house, though I could still see it perfectly in my mind. Blue door open, ceramic fox in the garden, Claire on the kitchen floor, and the cupboard in Maya's room. The road ahead was dark. Northbridge was unverified. The city was burning, and somewhere behind us the dead were learning to run. But Maya's breath was warm against my neck, and her fingers were gripping the back of my scrub top. And for the first time since my shift started at 8:02 p.m, 2 minutes late, with Harriet frowning at me, I knew exactly where I was supposed to be. Not in a hospital, not behind a locked door, not making lists of clean and contaminated. Right here, right now, carrying my daughter through the rain, away from the dead, toward whatever came next. That's where we'll leave Dr. Daniel Hale's story for now. Reunited with Maya, fleeing the dead with the 14 survivors, heading for Northbridge. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to hear part 3, please let me know down in the comments. Until next time, dear listener.